From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We're joined as always with our super producer, Dylan, the Tennessee pal, Fig, and most importantly, you are here. That makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. If you're listening to this the evening it comes out, welcome to December, Monday, December 2nd, the last month of 2024. The calendar may stop pretty soon, but the news does not. We just credit where it's due. Dylan is so awesome, you guys. As we were getting ready to record our strange news segment, Dylan said, "Hey, did you guys see that news about DB Cooper?" And I think we all immediately went, "What?
I don't know anything about this. Oh my gosh, tell me more."
I can't credit to Dylan, but we've learned this just came out pretty recent, like this week, I think just yesterday. It's a new lead on the DB Cooper case, the only unsolved skyjacking in American history. But it's maybe a lead because it appears that the children of a guy named Richard McCoy II, a convicted skyjacker, have been hiding a modified parachute for years. And this modified parachute may be similar to the type authorities believe DB Cooper used in his 1971 skyjacking. I'm pulling a lot of this from our pals at Interesting Engineering, Kapil Kajal.
What does a modified parachute consist of?
Unclear at this point. We'd need to do a little bit more digging. This is probably one of those do the Reddit kind of situations, but probably the modification for the harness, I would imagine. I'm just guessing here.
What does it mean, Ben? Is this guy potentially the mysterious DB Cooper, or just related, perhaps a co-conspirator?
Perhaps, skyjacking is not a typical run-of-the-mill crime, thankfully. The FBI says they do know a little bit more about the parachute modification because they know the guy who modified parachutes, a guy named Earl Cossey, who was a skydiver working with the FBI until 2013 when he was murdered.
Yeah, and this particular thing was found by this dude named Dan Greider, who's a YouTuber, right? And he found it 2 years ago on a North Carolina property that used to be owned by this other person, Richard McCoy II, who is he is a known sky heister, I guess.
Convicted skyjacker.
And he ended up dying in 1974, but just the fact that this parachute was found on property from this guy who was also a skyjacker means that maybe this dude, McCoy, was the real
McCoy.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
well, so would maybe the need for modifying a parachute for a skyjacking have to do with the ability to carry more cargo, hold more stuff, I just wonder.
It could be carrying more stuff. That's a great idea. It could be possibly making it less conspicuous if you carry it with you on a plane.
To smuggle in so nobody knows that you've got a big old hunchback situation going on.
I'm sure we'll find the answers there. We got this as breaking news. Dylan, if we get a breaking news sound cue. Great. There's another thing I think, Matt, you want to talk about before we really dive in here. We've said it in the past. There is a tragic and inspiring world record that has a pretty high turnaround.
Oh, yeah. So back in April of this year, the oldest man was Juan Vicente Perez. He was 114 years old, and then he died. And then...
Jeez, bummer.
I know. But awesome long life, right?
No, it's true.
Nice work, Mr. Perez. Then it got, or the crown, I suppose, was moved on over to a gentleman in England named John Tinniswood, who, up until just a few days ago, was 112 years old. Again, a nice ripe old age, but unfortunately, the crown is now passed on to somebody new that we don't know yet.
Right, because they're still searching. And unfortunately, in this particular world record, there's a non-zero chance that the person who technically holds that record now may pass away before they get found. It's really tough, too, because when you're talking about someone living that long of a life, a centenarian, then what you're seeing is the records get dodgy the further back you go. And I love that we're pointing out it's the world's oldest man which is rated differently because human women tend to live longer than human dudes. The oldest living person right now is Tomika Itoka, a Japanese national who is currently 116 years old. Miss Itoka, we wish you the best. What a life. What stories you must have.
All right. What do you say we get to the news, guys?
Oh, man, we should.
We'll be back after a word from our sponsors. And we have returned, been holding on to a lot of disturbing espionage news, particularly in the world of cyber attacks and China and the EU and the United States. That might be something we get to if we have time. First and foremost, I was thinking, guys, we look at DHL. I'm sure we all saw the news. There's some excellent reporting about this. A plane from DHL, a cargo plane, crashed near the Vilnius airport in Lithuania. The investigators are currently looking into it, but one thing that made this clock on our radar is, radar, aviation jokes, is that the plane left from Germany, and Germany's foreign minister, just in the wee hours on Monday, as we're recording this, said this could have been an accident, or it could have been, quote, a hybrid attack in volatile times. The plane itself, Swift Air Flight 5960, was a Boeing. When I get in front of that, it was a Boeing 737. It was operated by Swift Air on behalf of the courier company DHL. The investigation is ongoing as we record now. We do know, unfortunately, there was one fatality. There were 2 injuries. We're not sure exactly what went wrong. The big question right now is, was it a technical issue, which unfortunately can happen with any aircraft, or was someone purposely messing with the plane or messing with something on the plane? Was this an act of malevolence? That's what is keeping several authorities in the EU up at night right now. A great primer on this as of now is a piece from Lee Kemmons McManus, who is writing for the Daily Beast. Plane operated by DHL downed in mystery crash that killed 1 person. Now, this is a great article because it gives you the timeline, the primer of the tragic events, but it also points us to the larger context. This was not happening in a vacuum, guys. If we go back further in the month, still very recently to November 5th, shout out V for Vendetta. Is that the right one?
I think it is. Remember.
The
5th of November? I think that's right. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. I'm looking at you guys for the cosign. All right. So if we go to an article by Frank Gardner, who is a security correspondent for BBC, we see that someone, quote unquote, any unnamed Russian intelligence agency may have been targeting courier companies already in Poland and the United Kingdom and in Germany.
DHL is it like a consumer facing, or is this more for large freight stuff? It appears to be a very large private logistics and shipping company. I'm just wondering who's it for? They
do express mail. They do package delivery.
So it's a UPS-esque
situation. Yeah, it's like Germany says we have UPS at home. It's huge. They do over 1.7 billion parcels a year. They are a German logistics company. So if you were trying to disrupt or test run disruption on a courier network, DHL would be a great thing to compromise. This is why people are so intensely curious as to whether the recent Lithuania crash was the result of a conspiracy, because these parcel fires that have already been happening, last month in September, authorities arrested 4 people in an inter-European investigation. Western security officials, I said Western security people. Anyway, it's their job, is what we're saying. Those guys told U.S. media that they think these fires that were occurring as early as this summer, as July, were, quote, an orchestrated campaign by Russia's military intelligence agency, the GRU. Now, let's walk it out. Let's dig up the rhubarb on this one, guys. Why would you, if you were an intelligence agency, why would you do dry runs on a courier company like this?
I don't know. And I'm also like, I've always wondered like how large these types of courier planes are. So like a 737, that's like a jumbo jet. I mean, that's the same type of plane that would be for, transporting passengers. It does appear that the pilot and the co-pilot survived, and it was only one crew member that was killed. So it seems like it would be about the same level of staff as a commercial flight as well.
Yeah, and yes and no, right? It is a whole different operation because we are talking about cargo planes where it's
100%.
Mostly cargo that's being taken.
But I'm just
one way or
saying
another.
in terms of like personnel, like, you need a pilot, you need a co-pilot, and then obviously there was some additional crew. I'm just wondering how many
like
crew
a
are we talking
navigator.
about? That's right.
Yeah, it's a great question, though, because typically, I mean, think of a locomotive here in the United States. They're going to have a shockingly small staff for the amount or small crew for the amount of stuff they're carrying. And often, depending on the nature of the cargo, you'll see the same thing in aviation as you would in locomotion. I keep going back to these explosions, guys, because get this, right now, the best guess for the series of explosions over summer was that someone, quote unquote, someone had loaded rigged electric massage machines into cargo, and not all of the machines were rigged, just like not every pager made by that company in one country or another was rigged to explode, but these had some sort of magnesium-based thing, some sort of to them, right? Which is not what your electric massage machine is supposed to do. We don't know the nature of the massage machines, but we're looking into it. Apparently, they had an incendiary device as well attached, and this led to the things catching fire or blowing up. So some of them just sort of caught light, and then some of them absolutely exploded.
Okay, so I want to go back to the question you asked, Ben, where like, why would they do this, right? What's the goal for doing this stuff? So in my mind, I'm only seeing two scenarios, and maybe I'm wrong, so tell me what you think. The first one is to disrupt specific shipments. So get your shipments with the firebomb things onto other DHL shipments that they know have strategic either weapons or, like aid supplies or food or something that one of these courier services is sending to like a war zone, right?
Sure, yeah.
The second would be to somehow disrupt operations at a large hub, like in this instance where it's a huge DHL hub that, then has a massive fire and crash incident, which means probably most of their stuff is going to get delayed, at least for some period of time, depending on how bad the situation is, right?
Right. Yeah, and I think you're getting to one of the most salient points here. In this kind of operation, if there is an operation afoot, the content of the cargo may matter less than the infrastructure reach of the carrier, right? So if you are, for instance, compromising FedEx, you're not necessarily looking for one truck based on what it carries. You're looking for a truck based on where it goes. And so the ability to infiltrate the logistics operations of a giant like DHL is quite appealing to asymmetric warfare. And before this sounds too dry, I saw, let's go to New York Post, not my favorite source, but to give the human toll of this, I'd love to briefly play an audio clip of the Lithuania crash. Is that all right with you guys?
I was going to ask. I just saw that was available. Yeah, I'm anxious to hear it.
All right. Well, this will be short. It may not be appropriate for all listeners. So just trigger warning ahead of time. If this is not your bag of badgers, fast forward about a minute and a half.
Postman 1 Delta. Good morning. 1 Delta, descent altitude 4,000 feet, QNH 1020, LS approach only 1 mile.
Now, this is the moment air traffic control realizes they lost the flight.
And expecting ILS, runway 19. Could you please confirm expecting ILS and not confirm to the ILS?
I think in this shot, you can see the plane way in the distance, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Control, could you please confirm
if from 1A Delta, if we are authorized to the ILS after mission.
Sun 1A Delta, descent altitude to 2,700 feet, QNH 1020, cleared ILS Zulu 19, report established.
Okay, 2,700 feet with QNH 1020.
Here it goes.
And we are clear for the ILS. We'll report established postman 180. 1A Delta, correction.
Air Baltic 35 Golf Tower.
Go ahead.
Cancel your startup. Go back to your stand number. We just got a crash of aircraft on the final, so we will need some time.
Okay, setting down, going back to stand number.
Now we'll stop there. The first thing to say here is that we have to commend the control of the professionals involved. You know, you're hearing people reporting facts. They're not panicking. We can clearly hear, you know, the first 40, 50 seconds where it's just routine. And I don't know about you guys, but in my experience kicking it with ATC folks, air traffic control, their routine is already very intense.
They're cool customers.
Yeah, and in that video, you can see the plane coming in, right? As everybody's they're getting comms from the airplane. The airplane pilot and co-pilot are communicating and saying, yeah, we're going down to 2,700 feet. We're like descending now. And then right as it goes over the top of that DHL building, like in the background, you see a huge fireball.
Oof.
Yeah.
Guys, is there any possibility that this is a, 9/11-esque attack of some sort? I mean, obviously not from the same personnel that did that here in this country, but, it did narrowly miss a residential property. I just wonder if it was like a weaponization of an aircraft.
That's the question right now. We're still in kind of a fog of war situation as the investigation continues, because some investigators or some sources have said, we think this is a technical issue, right? Others are saying clearly this occurs within the context of that July arson attack series. We haven't had too much official statement language from, the aircraft manufacturer, Boeing, other than condolences for crew members and families supporting the investigation. Honestly, the boilerplate stuff. But again, I think it's indicative of the larger milieu here, the incredibly high tension right now between NATO and Russia, between Germany and Russia, that they immediately went public and said, hey, we don't know, right? We don't want to accidentally trigger an escalation by making unfounded accusations. One of the latest updates is that the Lithuanian Special Services, during their briefing, said there have been, at this point, no indications of foul play. So it could have just been a tragic accident. And with that, I have to ask you guys, do you got any spidey sense tingling on this?
Just that Boeing can't catch a break.
I don't know. This is a weird situation. I think we're going to have to learn more because when you watch, there are other videos that are available of this specific plane crash where it does look as though it's descending in a normal flight pattern. And then right exploding at the end, you can see the tail go up as though it is going nosedive, but it nosedives within, we're talking 100 something feet, 200
very
feet.
Low. Yeah.
Just
very low.
all of a sudden just goes zoom. So it could have just been pilot error and we just don't know yet.
We do also on again, a positive note, because, you guys have been trying to look for positive things lately. The two folks who did survive, it's entirely due to the action of the first responders and to dark lottery. Upon impact, the cockpit of the aircraft was separated from the fuselage, and the fuselage ignited. So if these first responders had not been as professional and as quick and competent as they are, and if the cockpit had remained attached, this would be a very different story. So with this in mind, fellow conspiracy realists, we want your help. You don't have to be extensively experienced in aviation or in sabotaging electric massage machines, I guess. But we'd love to hear the larger context. We'd love to hear your theories from most plausible to the most out there. Is it possible that we could be watching asymmetrical, at least penetration tests or dry runs of such a large supply chain network? If so, let us know. Conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com, 1-833-STDWYTK. Tell them Ben sent you. For now, we're going to pause for a word from our sponsors. Oh, do remember to tune in next week when we might talk about Macy's. Those guys, speaking of can't catch a break. But speaking of breaks, we're going to break for a word from our sponsors, and we'll return with more strange news.
And we've returned after a pretty spirited conversation off air about these potential tariffs coming our way and what that might mean in terms of, potential compromise from the Russians on the U.S. government, on the new incoming administration. It's something that I think we reserve for an on-air discussion a little bit later, but it is fascinating stuff. But in the meantime, you guys remember Pokémon Go to the polls?
Do I. I remember specifically a couple times with Pokemon Go, Noel, we would be hanging out somewhere when it first came out. It was all the way rage, and I kindly requested for people not to point their cameras at me.
I know. I remember there was a Snorlax on your shoulder, and you were like, get that boy off of me.
Get a different one. Go find a different Snorlax.
Go find a different
and
Mark.
Still be friends. Yeah.
It's true. You did say it respectfully, Ben, and I do appreciate that.
The ex-wife was obsessed, and she would travel to all different places to catch the old Pokemons.
Well, we see oftentimes here in the our fair metropolis of Metro Atlanta, those Google cars rolling around, mapping stuff, taking photographs. And, I'm sure we've all Google mapped our homes, and we see, oh, that picture is from a year ago, or that picture is from 6 months ago, or what have you, because there's a different tree or a different bench or something, or it was before I even lived here.
I waved to the Waymo driver today, who was collecting stuff. I was running some errands and exercising. I do that pretty early in the morning now, and I almost got hit by the Waymo driver. And so I just waved.
We don't have driverless Waymos here yet, though. I don't think, right? I saw my first one in Austin, Texas, recently, which I believe is ground zero for a lot of that kind of stuff. But it was driverless.
It looked to have a guy sitting in there, but not with the hands on the wheel.
Okay.
So maybe an outside test.
The one I saw in Austin was fully unmanned, and it was freaky. I'd never seen one before, and it was like right next to me, and I was like, what if it just, goes, AI goes bonkers and just sideswipes us or something like that? But no.
Yeah, all to say thank you for not hitting me this morning.
100%. And also all to say thank you for not Pokemon going, Ben, as well. This is a big obsession. I did it for a bit. It's fun because it capitalized on people's desire to play games, but also to kind of touch grass, right? Before that was as much of a kind of a buzz phrase as it is now. And so I remember when it first came out, super smart, very, very, tapped in people that I'm friends with. We're super into Pokemon Go, knowing full well the background of the parent company Niantic and their ties to Google, their ties to government programs. I believe there's some personnel involved in Niantic that had previous connections to the NSA. Ben, do you remember what the deal was with that? What was the Niantic government kind of crossover?
Yeah, so Niantic is a pretty fascinating case. It is an American software company, right? I think a lot of people, when you hear Pokemon Go, you assume it's a Japanese company. Makes sense, but Niantic is not. They're based out of San Francisco, and there are questions about things like the board and the founding. The company had spun out. It started with Google, but it comes from Google in 2015 after Google said, hey, we're restructuring to Alphabet Incorporated.
Yes. And if I'm not mistaken, the current senior vice president of engineering at Niantic also had ties to Google Earth, formerly a part of Google, where he was the co-creator of Google Earth and Street View and Google Maps. So, sorry, a lot of preamble here to say that your suspicions and concerns, Ben, along with, again, many of my very smart friends who'd still use the service or use the free game, were in fact accurate. on a couple of fronts. So there is a recent article from Jalopnik, which is a site that you guys always used to cite on car stuff. It's a really cool site. Yeah, I like Jalopnik a lot. And the headline says it all, guys. Pokemon Go was a plot to use your data to fast track an AI slop Google Maps competitor. And I don't know if you guys have been seeing this term flying around a lot more, but I love the term slop, referring to like AI generated garbage, basically, or kind of like lazy fake art or writing. They call it AI slop. So all of those individuals, millions and millions, chances are you out there probably played the game at least once. I certainly did. All of that information where you would go out into the world to catch these Pokemon, you got to catch them all, and to go to these places called gyms, or there were certain like waypoints where you had to, like, it was like, usually it would be a big building or a target or some kind of like geographical location, which is where you would have to go to fight other Pokemon. That was all part of it. So all of the information, the data generated by all of these people rolling around and checking in and scanning with their phones, it's ultra, what do they call it? Augmented reality. So you got an overlay of the little fella, you throw the ball at him, you try to catch it. And in that period of holding your phone up, the phone is recording what you're pointing it at, likely logging the GPS data as well as the imagery. So rather than having to have some sort of unmanned vehicle or a Google Street View car driving around constantly scanning and photographing and mapping spatially all of the different streets, you've got human beings which are much more nimble, able to get into much tighter places. And when you combine all of that into this massive neural network, you get really good information about data points related to mapping, the best walking distance, because when you would put it in, I remember, I haven't played it in a long time, you would kind of get walking directions on the thing to get to the point that you were seeking this Pokemon. They would be like, oh, so-and-so, a rare Snorlax was found near you, and then it would map you there.
And further, you're incentivized to go to very specific places.
They're telling you they can put it wherever they want. Yes, exactly.
You guys know I'm on the road a lot, knowing people who play Pokemon Go. If they're traveling, they can actually end up getting. I'm not fully sure about the details of this because I don't participate as a player in this game. They can, depending on their point of origin, they can get different incentives to travel different places that a local might not receive.
Well, and let me just give you this really quick. I mentioned the Jalopnik article and the headline. This is by Bradley Brownell. He says it very, very succinctly. By strategically placing Pokestops and Pokemon gyms, because the Pokestops, if I'm not mistaken, that's where you'd have to go to get more stuff, to get more Pokeballs, you get them for free after the stop replenished after a period of time. You would then go there again, click on it, and then it would spin around a little coin thing and you'd get random gear loot drops, basically. So I'm sorry to finish. By strategically placing Pokestops and Pokemon gyms, the gyms being where you'd go to fight other Pokemon, the company was able to grab images and scans of locations that even Google doesn't have Street View images of.
Wow. Yeah. So think about your Google Maps car that maybe many of us have seen, kind of like the Waymo car. It is on a track, right? It's a series of basically a giant 360 series of cameras, and it's on that track. It can see everything that is along that track. What they were able to do is take all the cameras off the track, including into your backyard.
Yes. In your living room, dude. These things would appear on your couch. Sorry, please continue.
But one of the things that they're pointing out here in their tracking data, which is, again, gotta say, something we pointed out in 2016, 2017 when we talked about this.
That's right.
They are able to get not just in the front of that church that's along the road. They can get on the side of it, in the back of the church, because, hey, there's a Pikachu back there. They can now get in, like, literally your backyard and your side yard and have a 3D imaged version of all of that stuff.
Google Car can't come into your living room. Google Car can't drive into your backyard, but it's your property. You're there. I would play it sometimes literally in my own home. So it probably is track. I mean, it's got a 360-degree 3D map of my house.
It knows where you poop.
No question about it.
This other part too, I appreciate the point about getting off of the road, right? Or getting away from, like, satellites are terribly clever invention, but they can't get everything. So this is tremendously valuable data, especially if you can incentivize a user to go to a place like, a part of East Asia, right? Just say Tokyo, for an example, that has a ton of side streets where you couldn't get that conventional Google map car. You might have somebody with that big nerdy backpack and have them walking around Kabukicho or whatever, but then extend that later, gentlemen, like as Homer Simpson says, embiggen it to perhaps some areas of the Middle East where you might have the same issue getting that heavy equipment over and keeping it safe in a place where automobile accidents happen. So now you've just got a bunch of people on their phones. Hey, U.S. military or anybody who has the scratch, this is how you get around the side streets in Basra or whatever.
We're going to get to that aspect in just a second, but I do just want to add to that point, Ben, you're absolutely right. Another great quote here. This is a statement from Niantic itself, basically copying to everything we're talking about and saying, what did you think we were doing? Over the past 5 years, Niantic has focused on building our visual positioning system, which uses a single image from a phone to determine its position and orientation using a 3D map built from people scanning interesting locations in our games and Scaniverse.
I just love it's built from people.
It's from people. It reminds me of that thing in Batman. I believe it was The Dark Knight, or maybe it was the original one.
No, you're right.
Everyone's phone was they hacked everyone's phone, reverse engineered them. Like it was a power that no one should have. That was the whole big thing about it. That Lucius Fox said, like, how can once we do this, we can't ever go back. Turned everyone's phone into a listening device, so they could find, and a 3D mapping device, so they could find
echolocation. Right.
That's right. So they could find the baddie. One thing I have noticed recently, too, that other mapping apps are doing, like Google Maps and Apple Maps, is you can get more precision in city locations where the GPS kind of gets a little wonky by using this live view and scanning around. And it'll capture the buildings, and it will then give you an AR, augmented reality overlay of an arrow pointing you in the right direction. That is what this is. These guys have just been doing it longer, I would argue.
You taught me that in New York once.
Well, and I know that it's effy, I get it, but it's also very convenient, and it really does work better. But that information, that when we do that, we are contributing to the ecosystem of all of this. And there's so much more we could talk about here, but I do just want to mention what you said, Ben, the military aspect of this in I believe a presentation that was recently captured, I believe it broke or it was leaked in some way. 404 Media covered this. A presentation by Brian McClendon, Niantic's Senior Vice President of Engineering, again, also formerly part of Google, the co-creator of Google Earth, Street View, and Google Maps, essentially did a presentation called Coordinates of Tomorrow, Why Spatial Computing Needs a New Map. And this happened earlier this month. This article came out just like literally 2 days ago, today being November the 27th. And it said, I'm just going to read from this piece on bleedingcool.com. During the Q&A portion, a comment came from Bellingcat's open source analyst and former British Army officer Nick Waters, saying that LGM, large geospatial models, would be unbelievably useful to the military, and asked if it was foreseeable for governments and militaries to purchase the information from Niantic. Ben, that is what you were describing. Like, how do we find these secret paths through these back alleys in places where we don't have that kind of satellite capability? People play Pokémon Go all over the world. It's super popular in Asia, and I don't know exactly how it ports over to the Middle East or some of the other countries we're talking about, but I haven't heard of it being banned outright.
Imagine this. Spin it out. Okay, this is just a thought experiment. I think our heads are going the same place here. Cast aside the general unhelpful stereotypes about who would or who would not play this sort of mobile game. Let's remember that there might be people in secure areas who, for one reason or another, have gotten bored because their job is just to push that fucking red button in a worst case scenario, and now they're looking for,
Pokemon.
Yeah, and that's brilliant and terrifying.
Dude, you're absolutely right. Somebody breaking the rules, obviously breaking
Yes.
the rules with their own personal device that maybe they got slipped through, whatever. I know there are clearances and these things are not supposed to happen, but I
Yeah.
can see it happening.
Dude, so the first image I got in my head when you were talking about that, Ben, was the Pentagon, right? Somebody just like accidentally mapping the entirety of the Pentagon. But I think it could be, I think you're right. I think it's like critical infrastructure on a more local scale. So like those water treatment plants that we've always said were super vulnerable, or the
Data centers,
electrical,
whatever. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Ooh.
Further, even if the security is up to snuff in some of those more sensitive locations, imagine if you're looking at a foreign power, right? And you're officially frenemies or whatever, but you know the water's boiling. There might be some shit going sideways on the horizon. Well, you don't need to have someone foolish enough to use a personal device in that secure area. You can map it by the absence of coverage. So what if everybody is
It creates the
playing
hole.
their
Yes.
game until they get to this one part? Now there's a hole. Why is there a hole? Let's send the satellite.
Yeah. Or it's like, hey, there's a wild war turtle in the war room,
Dude,
I mean,
that's how you find those secret buildings you guys covered. It's exactly what it is. Like everybody, there's a Pokestop somewhere, and we noticed that some users go into every single one of these row houses except for this one.
because the game rewards you with that kind of fastidious, obsessive, like mapping. That's literally what
bro.
it is, man.
Gotta map them all.
We
Gotta
maybe
map
should
'em
do an episode on some of this when more
Totally.
information comes out. I
Yeah.
think it's time to drop this one for now. But really, really great points all around, guys. Let's take a quick break, hear a word from our sponsor. Oh, and by the way, just credit where credit is due. This came to me initially from an Instagram pal, friend and fan of the show, Joseph. I'm not going to give his full name because he didn't give me permission. But dude, just want to thank you for hipping us to this very, very interesting story. We'll take a break for a word from our sponsor and then come back with one more piece of strange news.
And we're back. Guys, we've got a few updates to cover really quickly. Remember our continuing quest to find the weirdest stuff drugs have either been smuggled into, shaped into, or just we found inside?
Paper mache watermelons.
I think I know where you're going. Maybe. I'm excited to find out, Matt, because I swear to God, I almost texted you guys on that group chat where I'm texting you way too much shit.
Oh, well, hey, credit where credit is due. I got this via text from my friend AJ, and she just said, look at this. It is, guys, a 4-pound garden gnome, fully shaped, looks like it's 3D printed, and it is made of ecstasy / Molly / MDMA.
Finally, right? I think I speak for all of us. Finally.
Can I also just say that Ecstasy Gnome would be a sick name for an electro band?
Oh, yeah.
I feel like I know a guy who goes by that. But it's one of those
a lot of
nicknames-
guys, man. I wouldn't
It's
be
one of those
surprised.
nicknames that I don't, I hate when this happens. I think it's a nickname that no one uses around him.
Yeah.
He might
Yeah,
not
it's
even
one of
know he
those.
has that nickname.
Yeah.
I'd want to know.
Sorry,
So-
Daryl.
So check this out. In the southern Netherlands, by the way, this comes to us via BBC. We'll read the title so you can find it. Dutch police find gnome made of MDMA during drug bust. And so there's a lot of suspected narcotics in this one area. And hanging out with those suspected narcotics is a garden gnome. It's got its hands over its mouth, and it looks like it's going tee-hee. And
Yeah, because it's high as crap, dude.
it's probably it's grinding its teeth because it just
Yes.
popped its own bean,
Exactly.
which is I think a drug slang. So it is fully made, like formed of this stuff, and I'm just trying to imagine. I guess you have to break the whole thing down if you're going to process those drugs, as somebody who's going to distribute. But
I want to say there was a subplot in, I think it was maybe the movie Traffic, where there was literally a thing formed out of cocaine, and then you see them using some kind of solvent, literally dissolve the entire thing down, and then reprocess it and make it into a paste and what have you, dry it
And
out.
that's based in real world stuff. You can use those solvent. I mean, like you set this up earlier, you can clearly shape things, whether that be via cocaine, like with cocaine as a medium, etc. And then once you get it over the border, then or wherever the end destination is, then you can use totally legal solvents to derive it into
There
the
you
form
go.
you want.
I just like the idea of somebody with a tiny little chisel and hammer, like ding, 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 hammer and chiseling away at it.
That's got to be a lot of MDMA, though, right? To make the
That-
garden gnome.
Yeah, 4 pounds of it. I don't know how much that is. 2 kilograms. I don't know.
What's the typical dose of MDMA?
Whatever a bean is, that's all I know. So like a pill.
Yeah, there's the pills still. And, in the 90s, it was ecstasy and they were pressed into these pills with like Pokemon on them or like Mitsubishi. There were all kinds of different ones, Buddha, double stack, Ferraris or whatever the crap. But they were cut with all kinds of crazy stuff. Today, it seems like the term is flipped more towards Molly or
Candy flipped toward?
Yeah, sure.
I'm doing drug references.
I think it is. Molly is meant to be a purer form of the active ingredient from ecstasy, which is pure MDMA. But I don't believe that. It's still cut with something, man. Like, there's no way they're just putting that stuff out completely unadulterated. That's not how drug trade works.
Well, this MDMA is cut with a side of magic because this gnome is truly magical
and whimsy.
Yes.
I like how the authorities describe him as visibly startled.
Yeah, with his hands over. Oh no!
You caught me! I'm made of drugs.
Yeah.
Do we know if there were any arrests?
I'm not sure. Probably. I'm assuming, but I don't know.
What were the circumstances in which it was discovered?
Well, this guy's got to tell you, this BBC article is pretty. It's pretty short. It's not really robust, let's say. It does mention that MDMA is illegal in the Netherlands, as it is in many parts of the world.
What? No way.
And, as of 2019, according to the BBC, the Netherlands is among one of the world's leading producers of MDMA.
Well, the Netherlands is also like, the place where marijuana has been legal for decades.
They got big Freeport vibes.
There you go.
It's the vestiges of their maritime empire. I'm looking on a source called Mixmag, which I'm not too familiar with, but apparently
Mixmag is a techno website.
Okay.
It's an electronic music.
Okay,
Yes.
well then I trust them as legitimate for this. They're saying that a 4 pound, or for the rest of the world, 2 kilogram statue of this size is the equivalent of around 8,000 ecstasy pills. So at the very least, this is a pretty significant investment, right?
Which I would guess go for around $25 a pop.
A pill?
Yeah, I think so.
Wow.
That brought my Larry David out. No way. Pass.
US?
Skip. US dollars? Pass. Step down. What do you have for 15?
Man, do you have any rhino statues? We're talking full-sized rhinos.
The
That's
good
insane.
rhinos, too. Yeah.
Yeah. It gets hot in those rhinos. Guys, we're moving on to the next update. This one comes to us via The Guardian. We're just hanging out in the UK right now.
Jolly good.
Guys, what's a Frankenchicken? If you had to describe what a Frankenchicken is, or what you think a Frankenchicken is.
It's that chicken that's made of nothing but drumsticks.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's I believe the idea that's the old, like back in the days of analog, that's
Urban
the
legend.
old food conspiracy theory, urban legend, chickens that were just breast and legs with no heads. I believe the real version, they're sometimes called broiler chickens. They're the ones that are huge victims of the livestock industry. Also,
Yes.
we got a nice letter from PETA unrelatedly.
I know.
Yeah, it was very
That made
kind.
me
Thank
happy.
you, Wes.
Yeah.
And on the same page, but I think they're
Very
it's a
large, right?
Eugenics practice. They're modified to grow faster. Is that correct?
Yes, the way I understand the Frankenchicken term is, just as you said, Ben, used to be one thing. Now it is the real chickens that are grown en masse. So in tight little cages, but think way too many chickens per cage, and given all kinds of sometimes hormones to grow them faster, often antibiotics because they're in such close quarters. They get sick all the time.
A lot of them can't walk, I believe.
Oh yeah, not enough area to move around, often not enough natural light to even have a semblance of existence and understanding of where they are in space and time.
I mean, like with body mass, though, I think
Yes.
it's not infrequent for them to physically be incapable of walking even with the space.
Chickens
Exactly.
at their best are pretty big boys up top with little tiny legs. These would probably just atrophy to the point of being, completely useless.
It is a pretty disgusting thing, but it is an evolution based on a necessity for the amount of chicken that is sold to every grocery store, every place that sells chicken and a fast food joint, every other place that sells chicken. And so each one of these individual restaurants and chains has to source their chicken from somewhere. This story is about sourcing of chickens. Back in 2019, KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken, or just KFC, specifically in the United Kingdom, made a pledge. Hey, by 2026, we are going to stop using these types of chickens. We are going to source our chickens from places that have enough space to move around, that have natural light, that have all of these things. Basically, the way you would want a chicken to live, even if that chicken from the moment of birth is going to be killed and eaten, that chicken is going to have a better life, right? Now, that doesn't mean it's a good thing for that chicken necessarily, right? But it does mean if human beings are going to be eating chicken, at least the people who make those chickens into food can treat them well, right?
Yeah, sure.
Kind of an awesome move. KFC got a lot of accolades, or at least a lot of tips of the hat. Like, hey, good on you for at least treating the chickens well or pledging to do it. But they just came out and said, hey, everybody, there is just no way that we can meet this stuff because of the demand for chicken and the amount of chicken that's being produced and the type of producers that are out there. We cannot source enough chicken.
Like, even if we raise the prices, right? People past what people are willing to pay, even if we satisfied every other variable and obstacle, the supply chain itself is already so dependent upon this pattern that there's no way to alter it. You'd have to kind of build out a new chain of chicken chain.
Yep. They were going to get slower growing breeds. They were going to, have chickens that lived in light where they can move around. And they just said, no, we can't we have to buy chicken. So sorry. It's just kind of awful.
Did they not foresee these potential roadblocks? Like, people want chicken. People aren't going to stop wanting chicken. You made a pledge.
But that's why in 2019 it was a pledge rather than here is what we're doing next year or something like that, right? It's hopefully the stars will align, or the circumstances will change such that we can meet these goals. It just looks like they didn't.
A declaration of intent.
Sounds to me like a rose-colored glasses PR move more than anything.
I mean, when did they know the facts? The sad reality as they see it, right? About the economics of scale and the chickens versus, to your question, Noel, when did they decide, we'll hold off a second and just let this good PR wash over us?
Yeah. Well, here's a quote from Ruth Edge, EDGE. She is the head of sustainability at KFC UK in Ireland. She was talking to the Egg and Poultry Industry Conference, or at the Egg and Poultry Industry Conference in Wales. Yeah. And this is actually as of maybe a week and a half ago as we're recording this. She said, quote, "We're not saying we're never going to, but we're saying for 2026 and the way the market has developed or lack of, we're not going to be able to do it."
I guess I just don't fully understand what these unforeseen market forces were. It just seems like it's business as usual. Like, what is the big surprise?
I'll give you just more from this BBC article we mentioned at the top. KFC says there's an inadequate supply to meet the commitment because farmers are not switching in big enough numbers to slower growing breeds.
Probably because they can't afford to be honest.
Yes. According to KFC, they're working to source chickens from farms with, quote, lower stocking densities, but they're just having issues. They're not finding enough, basically, chicken growers, which is kind of a weird thing to think about, who are switching to the practices that they want to switch to because there's just literally not enough chicken.
Okay. Well, I get it. I guess that makes sense. I just don't know how they thought that things were going to be so much different.
It's a weird one because it's economy of scale. And it's also interesting that this is a UK specific situation right now for them, because I wonder, and this is very tangentially related, but I wonder if the scope of this has anything to do with the EU Brexit situation. Like if there are maybe laws in the EU that are different or more amenable to this kind of pledge or appearance of a pledge.
Mm-hmm.
Or if economic hardships brought on by Brexit led to a slowdown in what maybe was seeming to be in the cards.
Dude, the chicken industry is so crazy too. Like there's this whole middle passage for chickens grown in the US getting taken over to China for processing, sent back to the US, and then some parts of that chicken are also resold over the Pacific.
where the laws allow, right? Where
It's nuts.
Yeah,
It's nuts. It's bigger than I know the British hate to hear it, but it's bigger than England.
Let's do a big chicken episode. I think
Have we not?
No,
we
done
had
like
a livestock. We had
big
two
dairy.
livestock.
We've
done
cheese.
food and
Yes.
livestock, but let's do like just chicken.
Sure.
I think so.
Yeah.
Big
A lot of
chicken.
Crazy shit on that.
And I got one last thing. Well, two last things to mention that we're not going to actually cover today. The first one is a missing persons case. Hannah Kobayashi. This is somebody that, again, I think we need a full episode on. This is somebody who went missing on. Well, she didn't go missing on November 8th, but it's the story of her going missing when she flew from Hawaii to Los Angeles began on November 8th of this year. And there's a bunch of twists and turns that are happening right now. Specifically stuff that happened with her father pretty recently. It's very strange, and I think it's worth our time. We won't have enough time to cover it in one of these episodes. But yeah, definitely look up Hannah Kobayashi if you have time. And you can also look up Ryan Kobayashi, who is Hannah's father, who recently passed away as well. So missing person, and then father of missing person who was looking for her passed away. Very sad, messed up, but just it seems like a human trafficking situation. So something at least to keep our eye on. Last thing to mention is the DEA has decided to stop doing that whole civil asset forfeiture thing at airports where they, quote, randomly search people and then
jack your stuff.
Shout out to Clayton English. Yeah.
Exactly.
And a big part of that, by the way, is all the successful legal proceedings that have taken place. But civil asset forfeiture still applies to other agencies and other situations, folks. So be careful.
Can I just say, I've been really enjoying this TV series on Peacock called Lioness that is about a CIA program of embedding women in with like basically the close relatives or girlfriends or wives of terrorist targets. But one thing that I thought was really interesting in an episode, there's a part where they have a joint operation with the DEA, and it feels like it's a show that has a lot of research behind it, but it really shows how certain agencies are not created equal in terms of the resources they get. And the DEA does not have the level of resources as, say, the CIA or even the FBI.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the way they show it in the episode that I'm talking about is really stark and fascinating.
ATF is in a similar situation to what you're describing. Also, I would say in addition to unequal resources, some have more flexibility in their rules than others, or at least have historically.
Wasn't it some agency couldn't recently like justify where a gazillion dollars went? And
Do you mean like the Pentagon every year?
Yeah, but there was a specific story, and I wish I had better memory of which agency this was, but it was a big headline of like certain amount of money in discretionary funds, which basically is up to supervisors to determine where it goes, that they couldn't justify or couldn't exactly say where it went. And that's not that big a deal in some situations.
Oh, gosh. Looks like the Pentagon is set to, again, fail its annual audit.
That's what it was. Thank you, Ben. That's what it was. Yep. It was simple as that. But again, not big news in general. No one's going to get in trouble exactly. It's just a pass the buck kind of situation. And these discretionary budgets are a very real thing.
Well, I gotta say, again, attempting to keep things positive, the Pentagon is setting a track record for the largest entity of its type to repeatedly fail its annual audit.
Oh, dude.
So they've got their numbers up there.
Yes. I found a story from a month ago, guys. This is from New York Post, so okay, whatever. But here's the title. World Bank bureaucrats lost track of at least $24 billion in funds fighting climate change. And here's a quote from one of the officials. It could be twice or 10 times more.
When you say fighting climate change, do you mean fighting the concept of climate change?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
They were just they put on like gloves and they were just fighting the concept.
No. Truly though, is this like anti-climate change propaganda, or are they literally attempting to combat the effects of climate change? And just that headline is vague.
It lends to, check out our episode on greenwashing. It lends to that idea. Was somebody laundering money? Were they funding initiatives or NGOs? Look, it's hard to grok with most individuals, because most individuals technically are not billionaires, but a lot of money goes through the cracks every year. If you go to American Military News for a comp here, you can see that just a few days ago, the Pentagon failed its 7th audit in a row, and they cannot account for $824 billion.
Bro, you mentioned briefly the Macy's thing. Some employee, an individual, managed to conceal $115 roughly million, and it didn't affect them paying any of their suppliers. Because that was just a drop in the bucket of their billions of dollars, and it just disappeared.
$154 million. Jeez. Well, guess what, folks? It is free to contact us. Would love to hear, again, your craziest DHL theories, your responses to any of this stuff. Playing Pokemon Go, just like any other hobby, just, be aware of what you're signing up for. And if you work in a sensitive area, don't chase the Charizard, it's the new Chase the Dragon. So hit us up. We'll tell you how to get in touch with us, email, telephonic device, and of course, all over the lines, the onlines, until the cables get cut.
Conspiracy Stuff Show is where you will find us on the onlines. That includes Facebook, where we have our Facebook group. Here's where it gets crazy. X, FKA, Twitter, and YouTube, where we have video content galore for your perusing enjoyment. On Instagram and TikTok, however, we are Conspiracy Stuff Show.
We have a phone number. It is 1-833-STDWYTK. When you call in, give yourself a cool nickname and let us know if we can use your name and message on the air. If you've got more to say than can fit in a 3-minute voicemail, why not instead send us a good old-fashioned email? We are
the entities that read every piece of correspondence we receive. Be well aware, yet unafraid. Sometimes the void writes back. Big thanks to everybody who's taken the time to reach out. We've got some great suggestions for upcoming episodes. You're going to hear them, a few of them on our listener mail segment, and we do this all the time, every week. So please help us out. Give us your wildest pitch for a conspiracy, and then support it. Tell us why you think it might be at least partially true. We're tuned in. We can't wait. We'll also give you a nickname if you're feeling squirrely. Join us out here in the dark. Conspiracy at iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.